Welcome in, everybody. Thanks for joining today. Looks like we got a great turnout. Would love to start out hearing from you all. Where are you tuning in from? What club are you with? How long you been with the club? Any questions you have lingering on the topic today? We've got a lot to share, a lot of really great stuff. And yeah, looking forward to making this as interactive as possible as well. We have a few things to say, but I know you all have experience too, and so we'd love to make this as interactive as possible. Again, if you're just joining, feel free to drop in the chat where you're tuning in from. Always love to hear how people heard about us. If you're currently using TeamGenius, if you're a JVA member, we'll have Brianna joining from the JVA a little bit later today. Nice. Yeah, we've got people from Idaho, Tidewater Volleyball. Great to see you on, Tara. Ontario, North Carolina, Tampa, California, all across North America. This is great. North Dakota, Wisconsin. We're tuning in from Minnesota. Zach's actually out in Colorado here this week, but yeah, we're headquartered here in Edina, Minnesota. Um, and we have our partners or our another branch of our company is out in Boston, Scottsdale, and Edina as well, Human Powered Health. So really fun to see the webinar so well represented here. We'll start to get into it here. I'm going to share my screen in a minute, but some housekeeping things before we do that. We are recording this webinar, so we'll plan to send this out to everybody. We're going to send out the slide deck and some other resources like our tryout prep checklist after this as well. So don't feel like you have to take too many notes. Of course, you'll be able to look back at the recording and the resources that we send out afterwards as well. So any questions you do have along the way, drop them in the chat box. We'll be watching, taking notes, and we'll get to those towards the end or along the way if it makes sense to. And again, thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to share all that we have to offer here today. The topic, of course, today we have tryouts coming up this summer across a number of volleyball regions. So we're going to be talking about best tryout practices, the agenda that we have put in place here. We're going to give a quick introduction to ourselves. We will talk through some of the 3 million scores we've collected in TeamGenius over the years, the top criteria that we've seen people using to evaluate their athletes. We'll also get into how the size of your club affects the different tryout strategies you should have in place. There's a lot that we can dig into there. I think we have some good insights that should help any of those clubs who are experiencing growth or hoping to, and those who are at that 1,000 player mark and whatnot, and what tryouts might look like for them. Current tryout trends. We've also talked with some different customers, and I know Skelly's got some good insights into the different trends that we're seeing and innovations in the volleyball tryout space. And of course, we do have a tool now that offers or allows organizations to send out offers to their athletes and track those offers so that you can make sure that you're getting the talent that you want to within the club. And then at the end, we'll hear a few words from Brianna from the JVA. So we'll keep an eye out on, she should be joining here soon. And then, of course, like I said, we'll open up for Q&A at the end. So send any questions you have throughout, or feel free to save those. Zach is also going to drop some of the questions that we got from registrants in the chat. So keep an eye out for those. And we'd love to hear from some of you as well. Tips that you have, experiences you have, any stories based on the questions or otherwise at the end. So I'm Gabe Malinsky. I'm the sales manager here at TeamGenius. I've worked for TeamGenius for the last 8 years, and it's been a whirlwind experience. I didn't have the volleyball background when I joined TeamGenius, but I've worked with hundreds of volleyball clubs at this point to strategize their tryout processes, try to streamline things, make sure things are running efficiently and effectively. Because at the end of the day, you need to be looking for the talent that you want on the teams, but also making sure that things are running smoothly and you're running a professional process. So, lots of experience and things I can talk about, and I'll share some of those with you today. Funny enough, we did have two Gabes on the team in the first like year or two of the TeamGenius software being founded. So, Skelly, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, Gabe Skelly here. Thanks for everybody for being on today and hearing us chat and share some hopefully useful things. I've been on the team for 8.5 years, coming up on 9. Helped a lot of customers through tryouts and different evaluation process. Been to lots of volleyball conventions and chatted with a lot of people in person. And I always do a lot of calls and have conversations with uh, coaches from and heads of clubs all over the U.S. and Canada and really all over. And just like to hear what's going on and what kind of new things people are working on. In fact, I just bought a new book last week about volleyball development that I'm going to start digging into here soon because one of the club owners suggested it to me. So I always like to hear what people are doing and what's using and they're using and those kind of things and kind of bring that to you guys and share some ideas and kind of chat about what what the best things to do in the volleyball world are. We're going to have Rihanna soon from the JVA on as well too, but I'll kind of give you guys a little, walk through a little bit of TeamGenius, kind of some details here. If you're not familiar with TeamGenius, we're an athlete evaluation tool platform that's designed to help coaches run faster, fairer tryouts. It's more organized for the administrators. If you're running tryouts, camps, combines, you can share more details faster with the parents and players after evaluations if you're going to do offers, which we'll go through in a little while here. Is all digital evaluations. So all the coaches that are using our tool get a free app on their phone. It's across all the different platforms. You can also use a laptop to help run your tryouts faster. Again, transparency is a huge thing. And I think the more we get into technology and the more things are changing and moving faster, the more we want to be transparent. And that's really important when you get to your players and parents and your coaches, frankly, when you get into being able to have coaches see, maybe if you want to share what other coaches scored athletes as when they put them on different teams. But just that transparency, having the data there. So one of the things we're big on and helping you guys see the data to use for your evaluation process. We worked with over 120,000 athletes and evaluated over 3 million scores. And that's a big thing. So we know a bit about how to help with tryouts and evaluations, and we'll kind of share some of those today with you guys, some of our tips and tricks that we've learned, and then as well as a lot from current volleyball clubs and teams that we work with. Start here with the top criteria that we see when people are running those tryouts. It's funny, I was just working with the club this morning, sent a video over on some of these criteria, and they're talking about what they do for their evaluation process. So criteria, number one, serving. Serving is always a big one. Then passing, attacking, setting, defense, hitting, serve, receive, and then getting into some of those measurables, which in our system you might break out a little separately, but height, depending upon how you're going to measure height, there's different tools you can use to measure height. There's having the players jumping, blocking, and standing reach. These are the most common. A lot of you probably seen this for a long time. And these are what we see right now in the tryout and evaluation process this season, 2026, as clubs are running their volleyball tryouts and getting set up for the tryouts they're going to be running here in the summer and fall. We're going to show you guys just a glimpse of the tryout prep checklist. We'll be sharing this resource with you guys. Anybody that's signed up for the webinar, I think Malinsky is going to go through just a couple little things here and then keep moving.
Yeah. Yeah. This is one of our top downloaded resources that we've created over the years, just in conversation with club directors of all sizes. So right now we're kind of at this point, right, with most tryouts, not in every region, of course, but in a lot of regions right now, we have those tryouts coming up in around July. So making sure that you have your format created, which right now, you being on here or listening in, this is a great step for you to start to brainstorm how you're going to run things, if it's going to be the same as last year, if you're going to change some things up. That's what we're here to help you do. Happy to talk afterwards, of course, too. Not even if you don't use the TeamGenius system, we love talking tryouts. We've helped to run thousands of them, so always happy to be a resource there. Things like criteria, making sure you have enough court space reserved, the times figured out, how many sessions you're going to have, how many evaluators you'll have, and then just preparing to communicate with the players and parents. Maybe registration is opening up if it hasn't already. And then, of course, as you get closer to tryouts, we have a full list of everything that you need to accomplish before tryouts happen and after tryouts are happening as well. Things like communicating to the players, making sure that you get some feedback on your tryout process so you can make sure that you're doing the best that you can to give a great tryout experience to all of your players. So we'll send this out afterwards. These criteria, one last thing to mention there, of course, there's some overlap there. We don't suggest that you're using 10 criteria at your tryouts. So pick and choose from that list. I think those are just what we're seeing most commonly used in the TeamGenius system within our volleyball assessments. Now, on to the club size and the tryout format. This is something that Brianna and the team at Team Genius have talked about a bit in the past is tryouts are not the same for every club. Smaller clubs are going to run things different than larger clubs, and elite clubs are going to run things differently than recreational clubs. We really focused on just the size of the club, the size of the tryout. And when thinking through what you're going to do for tryouts, there's really three main variables, three or four. You can kind of separate some of these out a little bit further. But that first one is the quantity of your criteria. When coaches show up to an evaluation, they realize you're not going to have an hour with every single player. They're most likely going to see 40, 50, maybe 60 players at each tryout session. And so you don't want to overwhelm them with too many criteria. It'd be great to have an hour with each player, or it'd be awesome to be able to capture 20 plus criteria on each player like you might want to. But those are the processes that you should save for in-season evaluations when the coach gets to know the player, can sit down and give quality data points on the athletes. But at a tryout, time is limited. So you need to really hone in on what those criteria are, both in quantity and in specificity. And so that's where we really, I think, have the templates that we've built out that help you to make sure that you're going to be running an effective tryout and capturing the right data points that you need to on your athletes. The next variable would be that number of format or the number and format of the sessions. So most of the time in the volleyball world, of course, you're going to be running different drills, maybe ending the session or session two, getting into some gameplay. But drills are typically the most efficient, especially if you have a good number of players. If it's 5, 10 players, maybe 20 players at a tryout, that's different. You can get more into gameplay right away. But if you'd prefer to, if you're going to have more players than that, you most likely want to start with stations, typically quantitative metrics, height, weight, wingspan, jump, height, vertical, whatever it might be. Like those are the things you might want to capture up front, and then move into station-based skill drills and then gameplay. So the number and the format of sessions would be that second variable. And the last one, of course, is the number of evaluators. That can be tough for different clubs, right? Not everybody has 100 different parent volunteers or staff members that they can get to show up to a tryout. But the number of evaluators it's an important factor when looking at the number of players that you are going to have at your tryout. For smaller tryouts, when we say smaller, that could be anything from 100 total players trying out to 300 total players trying out. More than that, it kind of gets to like that larger size. We'll talk about that in a minute here. But for smaller tryouts, you typically are going to want to keep things moving pretty quickly while also capturing enough criteria, but not needing as many criteria as a large tryout because there's just not as much separation as you need between the players. One criteria per station is perfect. Don't overwhelm the coaches with a bunch of data that they need to collect. Otherwise, they're going to most likely miss some of those criteria on each of the players. The other option you really have is like 1 to 3 criteria, maybe up to 5 criteria, but 1 to 3 is typically that sweet spot if you want to just do overall criteria. Something like offense, defense, intangibles, something like that for the overall criteria. Or again, 1 criteria per station, and then 1 criteria for gameplay would be ideal. 1 to 2 sessions is typically enough for some of those smaller tryouts. You don't need the kids showing up day after day. Where we are seeing, Skelly will talk about this in a minute, but one of the trends we're seeing is, of course, like pre-tryout clinics if regulations allow you to do that. So that's where you can start to get to know some of those players. And when you have 1, 200, 300 players, you can typically get to know a lot of those players beforehand. And a lot of those players might be returning too. So you want to give them a fair shot at a tryout. Of course, you don't want your previous experience with that player to determine what team they make. If they worked hard in the off season or for those couple months that they weren't playing with you, you probably want to make sure that you're actually taking down scores on the players and giving them a good chance at making a higher team if they deserve it. And then one evaluator per station. It's usually enough. Sometimes two per station is ideal because then one of the coaches, the evaluators, can be actually like running the station. The other one can be evaluating. Those two can switch, but usually you want consistent evaluators throughout the entire trial process, not switching between sessions or anything because some evaluators are going to give really high scores, some are not. So that's something you want to keep in mind too throughout any trial process is keep the evaluators consistent. Otherwise, if the evaluators switch, then some players are going to get higher scores from that nicer evaluator. Others are going to get lower from the more harsh evaluator. And of course, with a smaller tryout, the expectation from the parents is that they're going to get quick results. So that's, I think, one of the biggest benefits to using a streamlined process, whether it's TeamGenius or a different system, using something that's going to allow you to collect the data very quickly, make your decisions, and then send those team placement offers to the players. That looks professional. That's going to provide a really good first experience, a first impression for those players who are new, or make those players who have played with your club in the past really happy that they are continuing to work with you and they're not going to look elsewhere if they have that good first experience. So we've seen a lot of train wrecks in the past, people coming to us saying we had a bad experience last year. We'd love to fix things up. That's what we're here to do and really why we're trying to provide as much insights in this as possible. Now, those larger tryouts, things change a little bit, right? One of the problems is you have more players, but and then of course like less time per player at those tryouts. The other piece there is you have more athletes that are more likely to have overlapping scores because if you have 1,000 athletes that you're trying to evaluate, or you call it 200-300 per age group, then you're gonna see some of those players getting the same scores. That's just an inevitable reality of having a lot of players that you're evaluating in a short amount of time. So I would love to be like, you know what, the answer to that is more criteria, but it's not. That's again not something that your coaches are going to have time for because they have less time per athlete. So the answer there is having better criteria. One of the trends we're seeing that I think Skelly will touch on as well is using named values instead of a number, a numeric score. So instead of a scale of 0 to 5 with half point increments, for example, you would use a criteria like team recommendation and then use a drop down list or a button group or that kind of format within a scoring app where the coaches can select what team that player should be on. So the criteria being called team recommendation, all of your teams listed underneath that, and then they're like able to select what team that player should be on. And in their minds, they should kind of have an idea, you know, we take 10 or 12 players for this team. So they should kind of have that mental check that these are the players that I believe should be on this team, and then these are the players that belong on this team. That's an example of what I mean by a better criteria, an efficient criteria that allows you to really differentiate the players. And then the other variables, of course, would be more evaluators, which a lot of you are probably laughing, like, how are we going to find more evaluators? What's the reality here that we live in? A lot of times that's not possible. That's why I put that second or third there. I know that finding more evaluators can be difficult, but it does help with differentiation, right? If you have more evaluators, that's more scores that will create more separation among your hundreds of players within an age group. And the last piece, of course, not easy either and not cheap if you're renting space, but more sessions is going to create more separation among those players, which is exactly what you want. It also allows you to maybe clarify in that second, third, fourth session that those are the players you want on that team. And I know that's not always feasible given the competitive nature of the volleyball space, But the better criteria is our biggest tip for those large organizations who are evaluating hundreds of players. Make sure you have really specific criteria that encompass a whole idea of like a team recommendation, or this is the level that this player is being evaluated on. This is where we believe they belong. The other piece there with the criteria I'll just mention quickly is if you're a larger organization, you're going to want a bigger scale if you're going to use a numeric scale, because if you have a 1 to 5 scale and there's 400 players that are being evaluated on 4 criteria, you're going to have a lot of like perfect scores or just below perfect scores. There's less separation between those. So 0 to 10 half-point increments would be better for large organizations. Skelly?
Yeah. So kind of some of the biggest trends I'm seeing here in tryouts, given along, kind of going along with some of the things Malinsky was talking about, it's really more data-driven athletic testing. So seeing more things, and people are bringing in data from, how fast the players are running with actual like measurables, or bring in the very specific things on, we talked about jump before. Maybe they bring in things like force plates, or they bring in things that really show different data on how the players are doing athletic testing. It could even be bringing in data from preseason, midseason, end of season last year on how the athletics are going with those players. I know work with a fair amount of clubs and different businesses that kind of do year-round testing in volleyball. So they have their athletes where they test them at least once a month, if not a lot more often, and bringing that data into the evaluations to roll up and see who the best players are going to be in the tryouts. Kind of bring that into the pre-clinics, tryout clinics, and open house periods. Seeing kind of a trend kind of starting this year. It's been going on for a little while, where there's longer periods of time where athletes can come in, try out, or they can be seen by the coaches doing some of the skills or drills or scrimmages. And some of that data is rolling into how they're placed on teams during the actual tryout process. One thing that I've seen actually kind of for a long time, and it seemed like it maybe went away, but it's coming back for sure. And probably most of the clubs that I work with is the position specific station-based evaluation. So evaluating players on whatever position they're trying out for. It can get a little more difficult if they're trying out for multiple positions. If you got a player that's going to be maybe looking for 2 different positions, but having specific criteria that you look at players for on those specific positions. So getting into that, so you don't just score a player on everybody on the same jump height or the same defense ability, if they're going to be a player that's going to play a different position. Different ways to go about that, but it seems like it's something that's really getting big this year. Number 4 here, coachability, character, and intangibles as formal criteria. Something I've preached for a long time, so almost 9 years now, but just that, coachability is a huge thing. I've got 4 kids myself that have all been in sports, and the kids' ability to listen to the coaches, get better as an athlete by listening to the coaches is a huge thing. And the character, as in like, teamwork, other intangibles, those are really starting to come through more and more as things that you see as formal criteria. In the past, in our system, I've seen those things entered in with comments into the comments sections. I still see that very often, and I love that ability to put in comments along with scores, that people are putting those in as formal criteria. Easier with it, an app that's digital where you can do voice dictation, those kind of things, but those really add into the criteria. Next thing here, transparent multi-stage offer process. So talked a little bit about, transparency being a bigger thing this year, which I've seen a lot. People want to make sure that there's people involved in processes, that they can see what's happening, why it's happening. So, more of these offer processes where, say, if a player doesn't get the spot that the parents thought they were going to get, maybe the coaches or the admins of the club can bring up the players' tryout details and show those to the parents. So show maybe how they compared with other athletes in that same age group, and kind of talk about where they should be placed. And with the offer processes, offers are always complicated. Easiest ones are usually going to be on site, offering the player, getting them to sign, maybe collecting some down deposit on site, but seeing more of these multi-stage offer processes as athletes, hopefully they're going to sign with your club if you want them with your club and don't go on to the next one. But we know that happens sometimes where they want to see what club that they get an offer at and then go to another club and try out. So kind of different processes in the offers. I've seen them seem to get increasingly complex, but there's a transparency that's wanted now as well. And then number six that I have here, younger age groups. I've seen this a lot too, looking at athleticism over skills for the younger kids. So kids that are 6 through 12 years old, looking at how they do as athletes, if they can run, if they can jump, if they can hustle, more so than the specific skills they've got, and seeing how they're going to develop as athletes. I think it's a great thing, and I've seen that a lot, specifically starting probably over the last year here, is that looking at the athleticism for the younger athletes, which is a really good indicator, I think, as how they're going to progress as athletes as they get older. So those are the biggest trends that I've seen this year, in the last year, specifically 2026, with the volleyball evaluation process with all the different customers all across the world I work with.
We want to quickly show this, not necessarily to show off what TeamGenius can do, but more so to show you how certain clubs are managing their offer sending and tracking processes. So I'll just jump in here and share a bit about kind of the background on this. So we'll make it quick. I know there were some questions on actually seeing TeamGenius. So TeamGenius is totally customizable. We don't pretend like we know how to evaluate your players. We let you choose how to do that. So on the back end of the system, what you're seeing right here, you choose what criteria you want to score your players on. So it could be on, these different stations, and then during gameplay, maybe a scale of 0 to 5, 0 to 10. How is that player doing? And then a team recommendation, which again could be like, offer this player ASAP, like right now, send them an offer. Or they should be on the A team, the B team, the C team, or we probably need to cut this player. So that's usually what we're seeing people doing is station-based criteria along with a gameplay or team recommendation criteria. And then you'd have a separate scoring form for your quantitative metrics if you want to capture height, wingspan, vertical jump, anything like that. You can also choose, of course, how many days you're going to be running your tryouts. That's one of those variables that we mentioned. And within those days, you're able to run check-ins. So when a player shows up to a check-in desk, that's sometimes the first impression that players have with your club. So you want to make sure that's operating really smoothly. You can pre-assign numbers and jersey colors and eval groups or tryout sessions. Again, very customizable system. So this is always set up differently for different organizations. But when the player shows up, you just check that box. Now they're showing up in the mobile app and ready to be scored by your coaches. You can also add walk-up players if you ever get players that forgot to register. And then the coaches themselves use an access key to get into a mobile app really easily. They just score the players like that. You can type in comments, great player. I can type. We do have some AI systems built into this as well for giving feedback to players. You can capture video if you want to of the athletes going through a drill or a station. And sometimes that's helpful to look back at a player's serve or the way that a player returned a ball or something like that, right? When you can really try to dig into the details of how a player might compare to a different player who you're trying to decide, who you're going to offer a spot to. So really easy to use mobile app with a few different views. And all of that data, of course, as it's captured, is syncing to a back-end dashboard where you're able to view the data. You can click to see which coach added what score. For example, these two players, looks like we want to send them an offer right now. And so we would put them on the roster. You're then able to go onto this team placement tab or placement offer tracking. And you can then batch send offers to all of your athletes or just those two players. Let's just say we're ready to send offers to all of our U11A players. We can then use AI to quickly generate an offer message to those players. Congratulations, we're excited to welcome you to the U11A team. You can add an expiration date if you need to hear today on if they're going to accept that offer. Go ahead, or maybe by tomorrow at midnight, we'll say. Put in that date. And then if you want to capture a down payment in that offer, you're able to just enter in that down payment amount. You send that offer, and that's going to go out to all of those players who you had assigned to the U11A team. You can also have a wait list so that those players can be on deck if somebody declines. And then those players, what they're going to see, they're going to get an email that says this message essentially. They click on a link and it brings them onto this page where it shows that their offer right now is pending. And if they want to accept it, they need to put a down payment in, accept, and pay that. And then that's going to move that player from pending to accepted. Or if they reject it, you decline, it's going to move that player into the rejected tab. So you'll be able to track who's rejected, who's accepted. And on the teams page up here under manage teams, you'll see any players that accepted, that are pending. You'll see that full list of players that you've sent the offers to so you can make sure that you're getting offers to the right players. There's some other features that I won't get into today. There's a drafting tool. You have the ability to score not just in a mobile app, but on paper and pencil if you prefer to score or to import those scores. You can take a picture of the scoring form, it'll upload, or if you prefer to use a Excel file or something, you can always do that too. So we allow for different customization and to email out those offers or feedback reports. Those feedback reports would look something like this. So it would show maybe the day of tryouts, or maybe it's end of season evaluations. It shows all the players' scores below, any comments below that the coaches have added to tell the player how to develop in the off season. So there's a lot you can do within the TeamGenius system, but I hope more than anything that this at least gives you an idea of how people are managing that offer sending and tracking process. It's not an easy process. There's not a lot of tools to do it, but this is a brand new feature that we built this year to make it as easy as possible. And it's all based on feedback that we've gotten from people just like you. All right, great. Brianna, you joined just in time. You want to give yourself an intro and just tell us more about the JVA?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Brianna Schunzel, the Director of Education and Partner Development, fresh off a Line Volleyball Summit, which we held last week in Dallas. And through our partnership with Team Genius, we're able to collaborate on workshops like the one today. But I am just super impressed in how over the last several years that we've been partners. You've continued to evolve. And like you said, you've taken feedback from club directors and club operators, the ones that are in the thick of it. And just coming off the summit last week, everyone was looking ahead and knowing summer tryouts were happening. And Dallas was actually having tryouts already. Those that they're in another Wild West world over there. But I don't know if anybody on the call is from that area. But the stress, it's top three stressors for club directors. And, JVA is constantly communicating with the club directors and those leading the programs. And, you all really do alleviate so much. Just from the standpoint of everybody being able to keep things in check with their staff and the communication through the app. And not having to look at someone's clipboard or having a text from somebody, and everybody just being able to have that uniformity for their tryout process. So can't speak more highly of our partnership with Team Genius and the software that you guys provide. But obviously, if you have any questions about JVA, you can contact me. You can follow us there at JVA Volleyball, and happy to help you as you head into tryout season or planning for next season if you're fortunate enough to still have the fall tryouts and have some time. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah, you guys have been great partners of ours and really love what you guys are doing for the volleyball community as well. So, yeah, well, great. We had a number of questions come in during registrations, so we'd like to dive into those. If you have other questions, please do send them in the chat right now, and we'll take a look at any of those that come in. But Skelly, I'll let you answer these first couple if you want to dive into them.
Yeah, for sure. And anybody that's on, if you have, suggestions on these as well, let me know. But just working with, clubs and setups that I've done, previously on these different things. Number one that came in, how much individual skills versus game situation play you should observe. I would say, a fair amount of both. I think the individual skill is a big thing. I also think the game situational play is a big thing. As you guys know, you've probably seen athletes that try out really well, but then when it gets to actually performing on the field where there's other stressors, or rather the court where there's other stressors, they don't do as well. Or, falling back into, if you're going to look at some of those intangibles like coachability, you can't really see very well what an individual skill and coachability is going to look like, but you can if they're on the court and you want to do specific things in the middle of actual gameplay. So I think there's a good mix of both. I think for younger athletes, again, it's going to be looking at that athleticism like we talked about. And then older athletes, it's going to be those specific skills that you'll see better when they're in those game situations. That kind of goes into the question here. Your 11s, 14s, 17s. One of the things we do easily in TeamGenius, and we've always thought this was an important thing, is being able to weight different criteria automatically based on those different ages. So, for your 11s, you might have the different skill sets that you have around athleticism at a 60% or a 65%. You might have things that are skills around athleticism for your 14s at 50%, right? Or maybe even at 45%. And the specific athleticism in your 17s, you might go down to a 30%, where you've got somebody that they're really, really good at spiking the ball. They're really, really good at defense. And maybe they're not the fastest athlete. Maybe they can't jump the absolute highest, but they've got the skills that can override those things. That's where you'd weight those things with the older athletes a lot higher than you would with the younger athletes. So I think it's very important to think about that as how you do change those things for different age groups of athletes. And I see a lot of clubs do that with our system. Number two here, how can you run an effective tryout when athletes only have partial attendance due to overlapping tryouts? We also, we encompass that with TeamGenius with essentially if an athlete comes to a tryout and doesn't get scored, their roll-up score, so across, multiple sessions or days of tryouts, the day that they're not there or days they're not there doesn't roll up into their score. So their score we look at automatically, and you of course can set this differently, would be the average weighted of the days that they're actually there at tryouts. And I think that's the fairest way for clubs to do that. My suggestion wouldn't be to penalize an athlete if they can't make it, if it's not, something that they can change. Of course, up to you guys. If it's something where, tryouts are absolutely mandatory, they make it to all 3 of the days, and the kid is not going to day 2 for some specific reason, maybe you do put in a lower score on some of those criteria. But in general, it's best in our system automates this to not count in those days with athletes not there and give an average score across the sessions or tryout days that the athletes actually show up. I think Gabe Malinsky was going to go after the next 2 there.
Yeah, let's jump into those. And we had a question come in from Dallas as well. Dallas was asking about the TeamGenius, the offer letter sending and tracking feature that we showed. And some people will use that, I believe, for their full season registration, just to capture those registration dollars up front. Sometimes it's easiest to do that. And we're planning to build that out more. So people will be able to create payment plans. They'll be able to probably find a better fit down the road for the full season registration. But for now, it's really like, what are you needing from that player up front? Are you needing them to just pay that down payment to secure their spot, or are you hoping to actually capture the full season payment? So it's kind of up to you how you do that. It's a very simple registration feature right now, but that will get built out more as we develop that feature. And it'll be based on feedback from people like you, Dallas. So if you have any necessities that you would have in that feature, send that to us afterwards, and we'll pass that along to the dev team so that they know exactly how people are planning to use this feature, and they can make sure it fits into your process. Now, the next question, do you recommend scrimmaging? I know Skelly touched on this, but we absolutely recommend scrimmaging. I think that you need to capture some of the objective data up front, of course, let the kids get stretched out as the tryout is starting, and then get into some of the drills, which I think are important too, because certain skill sets, you're not necessarily looking for, like certain positions, I should say, you're not necessarily looking for like a certain skill set in a specific position. So drills are always great to have the kids going through up front, and scrimmaging, we've always said, and we've heard from others that some players, they've just got that mindset for any sort of gameplay. They're always in the right position. They're always communicating with their peers. And those are not things that are going to come out in a skill specific drill. So it's really good to sort of solidify your decisions based on that gameplay. And if you ever have a fallback criteria that you go back to when forming the teams, it's probably that gameplay criteria. So I would say absolutely the more you can scrimmage, the better, but it still is important to get some of those skill-based drills in up front. That fourth question, when do you communicate existing players being cut or moved to a different team? This is a tough one. I'd love to hear from others if they have thoughts on this. If you want, you can raise your hand and we'll add you into the conversation so you can share your screen or not and just give us some of your feedback. But for us, what we've seen, we have always encouraged people to allow your existing players to try out beside the new players. That way you can truly see how they're comparing to each other. So I guess with that being said, you're not necessarily going to cut that player ahead of time or tell them they're moving down a team. You'd be bringing them to the tryout and then telling them afterwards if they didn't make the team. What that also does is it shows them or allows them to see how they compare to others in the age group and maybe realize themselves, yeah, I am falling a little bit behind. Maybe I shouldn't be on this team anymore. Of course, it doesn't always happen, unfortunately, but it is the hope that you allowing them to come to the tryout is giving them a fair chance to prove themselves if they did develop it all in the off season. And for those clubs who maybe there's no gap between tryouts and the season before, that gets a little bit trickier. And I'd be curious there to lean on some of you for a response. So if you do have anything to add to that, feel free to, again, just raise your hand and we'll let you in so you can say a few words on that. But that's sort of our perspective on it and what we've heard from others in the past. We had a question from Jeff as well. Jeff asked, can you add a weight to a specific skill, like a setting criteria has an additional weight and you want to evaluate their yes, absolutely, Jeff, you can do that. So within the TeamGenius system, what you're able to do under scoring forms is set a weight on the far right side. So for serving or setting, whatever the criteria would be, let's even go down here and say like gameplay, like I said, that's a pretty important one. A player that's good in a match is probably the player that you want on the team. Drills, it's good to see like specific skills, but that doesn't always translate directly to a game. So you would probably want to bump that up to be worth something like 200% or 200 points, which would be 29% of this evaluation weight. And for team recommendation, same type of thing. Maybe that's a great one that you want to fall back on, but not weight into that overall assessment. So you could bump that down to 0%. So you can very easily change those. And for a quantitative scoring form, height, wingspan, vertical jump, those are great to reference. Like if you have two players that scored equally, you maybe want to take the player that can jump higher, but also you don't want to weight that into their overall score because the player who's good in a match, that's the player you want. So that's an example of a scoring form. You'd have two of those in here, tryouts, skills, and tryout measurables. You would then weight those measurables at 0% so that's not going to affect their overall score. And it's super easy to do within TeamGenius versus in an Excel spreadsheet trying to change some complex algorithm. We've made that as simple as we can possibly make it. Yeah, not a problem, Jeff. Other questions? If not, we can wrap it up here, but just want to say a big thank you to Brianna and the JVA for being a part of this. Like we mentioned, it's always been great working with her and her team. Pricing wise, yeah, if you want to reach out, I just saw the question come in. Feel free to reach out to us. We can get you a direct quote. And if there's anything else that people want to discuss afterwards, TeamGenius related or not, feel free to reach out and we're happy to discuss. Just again, this is a space where people, I think, are always leaning on each other for better processes. And we're very grateful to be well connected in the space and just kind of being informed on what the trends are. And so we'll continue to do this too. We'll do another webinar in season talking about the importance of in-season evaluations and how that's done in TeamGenius, as well as some trends there. And yeah, just can't say thank you enough to all of you for joining. Looks like one last question from Jeff. For injured players, do you have any recommendations on how to do that? That's a great question. One of the pieces that we always recommend there, and one of the reasons we preach in-season evaluations and end-of-season evaluations is if a player gets hurt at tryouts, let's say they go through the first drill and they all of a sudden ankle is twisted, what are you going to do? Go back to last season's end-of-season evaluations, look at how the coach rated them, and you can base your player placement decisions on that. If they're the best player on their team, that's going to show in the data. If they're one of the lower players, that's going to be a little bit tougher to make that decision, but at least you have the data to fall back on. And if they reach out and say, why did I make this team even though I was hurt? Like, you have something to go to them and say, you need to work on X, Y, and Z. This is what your coach said about you last year. However transparent you want to be, you can do it if you have the data. But as far as like if a new player shows up and you don't have data, it's really hard. And I think the biggest thing I would say is just try to have like a makeup session. Hopefully their injury heals fast. If it's a sickness, obviously that can go away a little bit faster than an injury. But that's typically all we can really say about it. If there's nothing else, yeah, again, thank you so much. We'll plan to send all these resources we mentioned, the recording out, and we're here to help however we can. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.